Welcome back to It's a Yes, Making It in Media, the podcast where we get into the real conversations about building a career in one of the most exciting and fast-moving industries out there.
We're so delighted that you're joining us today because we're diving into a space that has genuinely transformed the UK advertising landscape over the last few years, and the pace of change is only accelerating.
We're talking about retail media.
If you work anywhere near advertising, media sales or brand marketing in 2026, retail media is impossible to ignore. It's moved well beyond the early adopter phase, and it's now a core pillar of how brands invest, how retailers monetize, and how agencies are planning.
Today, we're getting into all of it, the trends that are reshaping the UK retail media market right now, who the major players are, what formats are being bought and sold, and crucially, what it actually takes to build a successful commercial career in this world.
And we couldn't have a better guest to help us unpack all of this. Joining us later on today is Nick Ashley from Tesco Media, a business that has been at the absolute forefront of retail media for years, powering some of the most sophisticated, data-driven advertising solutions in the world. How many billions of pounds do you reckon that retail media might be worth in today's market?
Honestly, Debra, as ever, I haven't got a clue.
Well, it's heading towards 2.7 billion by the end of this year. So it's a very hefty chunk of revenue being invested through media platforms in retail environments.
That's amazing, isn't it? So in your view, what does retail media really mean? Because it seems to me that we have kind of concocted a new combination of things that really didn't exist going back definitely 5 years. So what is it that we're really talking about, and what has actually formulated that sort of new avenue?
Well, I think to answer that, I'm going to go back a little while, Jo, to my first exposure to what retail media was. And if you'll forgive me a very quick story, I was working at Hearst, or Nat Mag as it was then, selling advertorials. And one of the new clients that I was looking to develop was Tesco, who didn't traditionally spend anything in print media. And over a number of years, we developed them as a fairly key client, buying into advertorials across brands like Good Housekeeping and House Beautiful. And I remember very clearly one year going in to have a conversation with the Tesco marketing team about the advertorial work that they were going to plan for that Christmas. And they told me that they were launching a loyalty scheme. They wanted to get to know their existing customers better.
Wow, so you were there right at the very beginning.
Well, it was a very interesting meeting because it started with a no. It started with a no, which was, no, we're not going to be spending any more money with you, Debra. And by the end of the conversation, we'd identified that what Tesco were trying to do was to really reward and incentivize their existing customers. And they chose to do that by launching their first ever magazine. And that was my first taste of what retail media meant. It meant a retailer driving what a magazine could be and then distributing it to their existing customers to increase the basket value from their existing people walking through the door. And maybe that's where it began. At that point, it was largely funded by suppliers. And I think the retail media story has evolved because now actually you've got retailers selling their media, very extensive media menu, not only to their suppliers, but to other organisations that value having a relationship with the enormous audiences that they can deliver. Okay, Jo, so I started talking before about retail media meaning a magazine to me. In 2026, how many different formats can we possibly think of that our listeners might be familiar with?
There are loads here, Debra. So you've got on-site digital formats. So that can be sponsored product listings, sponsored brand placements, display advertising, on-site search, shoppable content and recipe integrations. I mean, recipe integrations, that's quite amazing, isn't it, really? That you can actually have a link to buying your products, where you're looking at a recipe. And then you've got all the off-site formats like programmatic display and video, social media stuff. So that there's sort of links that go to Meta, TikTok, Pinterest and YouTube. And then you've got connected TVs or the screens that are available and digital audios. And then you've got influencers and creators, all of whom are engaged in the retail media sort of space in some way. When you add into that the in-store physical format, so digital screens in store, smart shelf and aisle technology, and then the click and collect delivery touch points, there are so many different things. And that's before we even get to the measurement of it all.
So just targeting an audience at every single stage of their purchasing cycle.
Completely. And I think that's what's made it so clever, that all of these things have become what is called retail media under a broad umbrella, and has created so many new avenues to market for the advertisers in the space.
So if I wanted to get into retail media, where do I start?
Broadly speaking, we haven't seen too many entry-level roles in this space, largely because the retailers are building on or wanting to build out their own teams. They're looking for expertise from other areas. And the kind of things that have worked really well is anybody in a digital sales role or a programmatic sales role, or anybody who has out-of-home experience. Depending on the actual activity required in the role, all of those experiences can translate. And there are some people that have moved over even from print or audio, because there are lots of, some of the retailers have got audio offerings as well. So there are lots of different disciplines. It's really about being able to harness the experience you've got, whether that be agency contacts, client contacts, programmatic DSP sort of experience, and utilize it to show that you've got enough to build on and then develop a career in the space.
That's very interesting, because I'm thinking about the two challenges that faced anyone selling retail media in the early days. And I'd be really interested to understand whether they still exist right now. The first was that agencies didn't really buy retail media solutions. It was a direct client sell, and it was a trade marketing conversation rather than mainstream. I'm interested to know in 2026 what the agency appetite is for retail media solutions now.
My sort of experience is that actually we've found people roles in retail media who do have really good agency contacts and experience. And we've also found people who sell directly to clients, and both things are valuable. And I think that what retail media operations are doing is educating the market in both places about how best to use all the platforms. And that is a multi-channeled approach.
And the other thing that was always a challenge was that as a salesperson of a retail media solution, you could do a really great deal, sometimes finding that when the retailer then saw who you'd sold it to, for whatever reasons which were completely out of your control, it wasn't necessarily suitable for it to be deployed. So there was a slight disconnect between the sales conversation and what could actually be delivered due to the other issues that retailer might be facing.
I'm absolutely sure that is still an issue. And we all know that retailers have really good relations with certain suppliers, and there may be things that are conflict of interest. And that is a highly sensitive issue that I think they've probably all had to learn to work around.
And your comment earlier about the data fluency skill that is really critical in retail media, I suppose that must be because from an advertiser's point of view, if you're investing in retail media, you'd hope that you get the complete loop of being able to tell your brand story and then see how it converts in terms of sales.
I think that data is the thing that and the access to data is the thing that has really driven the whole growth of retail media per se. But not every role in commercial retail media needs a background in data. You need to be able to understand the data, but there are specific opportunities that are very data-led, that will lend themselves to people who are not what you and I would define as salespeople. And then there are other roles that are very sales-led, where you just need to understand how to utilize the story that derives from the data.
Interesting. So I understand that Amazon advertising is generating over $50 billion globally on an annual basis. I'm interested to know how that works within Amazon, the retail sales story.
I think that Amazon and the likes of eBay have absolutely driven the changes that have occurred across retail alongside the data piece, which they obviously had access to very early doors. And I think that the pace of change has been pushed by those sorts of businesses. And also the technology that's supporting retail has been driven by those businesses as well, because they were founded on the tech.
That makes great sense. And I suppose within that ecosystem then of retail media, you've got more and more tech businesses emerging. So, Jo, I'm interested to find out from you what hiring managers tell you that they're looking for when they've got vacancies in 2026.
So beyond the sort of hard skills that we talked about, so experience in one of the actual sectors that might enable you to transfer, what the overall requirement is for people who can operate at the real intersection of media, data and commerce. So people who are not scared to look across all of those things and they're not siloed in just one area. And it's also that senior level corporate engagement, people who have the gravitas and the ability to communicate and ask the right questions. Yeah, not just focus on what they know already.
So it's quite a specific type of person that's going to thrive in this environment.
They're not asking for much, really, are they?
Okay, I'm feeling very intimidated. But I think the two things that I took from what you just said, which I thought were particularly interesting, is you've got to be comfortable with the fact that it's moving sands, shifting sands all the time, and that the environment that you're selling in is evolving really quickly. You're going to perhaps be asked to sell something completely new next week and take something brand new that is perhaps just being developed to market. You've also got a kind of parallel thing going on all the time where you're selling to a client, an advertiser, but you've also got another client that is your retailer. And you've got to keep both of those parties happy simultaneously. And I think that takes a very particular type of salesperson that can manage those two different sets of relationships that can often be harmonious, but sometimes can have very different agendas. And you've got to be able to navigate that all the way through. So your people skills perhaps are really important here. It's not just about a digital kind of pitch. It's really managing personalities as well.
Completely.
Just to let you know, if you want an easy way to remember and apply the ideas from today's episode, we've got something to help. Head over to makingitinmedia.com and sign up for our newsletter. After every episode, we'll send you the key insights and practical takeaways that you can use to help you get hired, stay inspired, and build a successful career in media. That's makingitinmedia.com, and the link's in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. Joining us now is Nick Ashley. Nick is Propositions and Go-to-Market Director at Tesco Media, and he brings a wealth of experience in this space. I know he's going to give us some really great insight, Jo, about where the market's heading and what it takes to thrive in it.
Lovely to have you on the podcast, Nick. What do you think has really changed most in the last 2 or 3 years? And you may want for our listeners just to tell them exactly what retail media really is.
I think unlike a lot of other media, it isn't a single channel. So it's a whole series of different touch points that a brand can use to reach customers. So in our case, that could be our Tesco's web and app. It could be our stores. It could be the data, Clubcard data that's used to sort of fuel all of this communication. It could be CRM, or it could be partnerships with other brands. So it's a broad range of different touch points is the first thing. I think the boardroom interest and what's changed is that there's a couple of things really. I think number one, I think retail media used to sit in what we used to call shopper marketing. I think moving forward, it's become much more central and it really intersects marketing, commerce, customer insight, and obviously commercial growth. So it's become much more central, I think, to people's marketing plans. And I think a lot of the more traditional ways of building brands are obviously under a little bit of threat and have definitely changed over the last few years. So that I think people are seeing retail media because it's so connected to the point of purchase as being an opportunity for them to provide really, really helpful but most importantly, accountable media that they can see their return on. It's definitely become much more central to most of our clients' marketing plans, I would say.
Just from your perspective, so you moved from Mindshare to Tesco, sort of via the dunnhumby route. How did you find that transition from agency to client side?
Oh, wow. I absolutely loved my bulk of my career, which was agency side. So I spent 20 odd years at WPP. I think I was very, very privileged. I always think that agency people are very privileged to have this window into their clients' worlds. So when I was at Mindshare, I was running businesses like Nike and ITV, and to have the opportunity to to make a discernible difference to those clients' business was really interesting. I absolutely loved it. I moved to Tesco in 2017, and there are a couple of reasons why I did it. First one was, I think I found that the more senior you got at agencies, you were less really involved in individual clients, and it was that really excited me. So the opportunity to go and work specifically on one business was really exciting. So that's why I did it. So I was head of media at Tesco. Started off as me, and when I left 5 years later to join Tesco Media, there was a team of 15 or 16. So we were there, and the reason I joined Tesco at that time, if you think back to 2017. Tesco was in a different place to where it is now. So it was about rebuilding the brand up. And we had a fantastic set of media plans and marketing plans to help us deliver that over those few years. And then in 2022, I moved over to dunnhumby or Tesco Media to do the retail media growth. So I guess it's all three sides really. So it's been a combination of agency, client, and media owner over the course of my career, and all I think have brought a tremendous amount of value.
Could you have seen how quickly retail media was going to take off when you made that decision?
We definitely saw the potential, but I think the pace that it has exploded has probably surprised everyone, but in a really, really positive way. So we'd witnessed what had been happening in the US. I think significant growth of retail media networks over in the US. But I think really importantly from Tesco's perspective, we always talk about the win-win-win. So we talk about retail media as effectively doing three things. So the most important thing for Tesco is Tesco's customers. So retail media, when done really well, should be helpful, should be relevant, should almost not be seen as advertising. It's there as part of a shopper journey, part of a customer journey. The second most important is obviously the advertiser and how retail media can help drive growth for brands in an environment where they're so close to point of purchase. And the third most important thing is Tesco. So how it can then strengthen both relationships with customers and suppliers as a result of it. So did I think it was going to grow as quickly as it has done? Maybe not. Did I see that it was a big growth area? Absolutely, definitely.
It's so interesting, isn't it, listening to you, Nick, because obviously first-party data is something that media owners are recognising the value of. Since the launch of Clubcard, Tesco's obviously had one of the richest first-party data ecosystems in the UK. So how do you turn that into something that genuinely adds value for brands and doesn't just look like more media inventory?
I think that's a brilliant question. And that's at the heart of what we're trying to do. So everyone will know this, but Tesco has a significant behavioural database, Clubcard, 24 million households. But it's not just the data in its own self, in its own right. It's how we then use our data science, which is where dunnhumby comes in, to then create audiences that are relevant for particular brands. So we do that in all sorts of different ways. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If, let's say, you're launching a new product, we know that there are a suite of Tesco customers who are very experimental and are quite likely to try within a category. Therefore, let's create an audience that's intended to reach that particular group. Or let's say that we know that a brand, unfortunately, might be losing customers. How do we identify who's at risk next? And how could you shore up that potential? How could you retain those customers within the ecosystem? So that's just two examples. There are zillions of different ways that you could potentially think about how you might use that. And then what we do is that we then either in Tesco's existing ecosystem, so on Tesco's web and app, or through partnerships we have with the likes of all of the broadcasters, Meta, Pinterest, etc. We then match that data and our advertisers can reach that particular customer group across those different platforms as well, where we're effectively using media as very much a growth engine, which is there to deliver against a brand's specific objectives or challenges. And the Clubcard Insight is absolutely the heart of that. So
we're always interested in understanding the impact of AI across everybody's lives. But as far as AI is impacting retail media, how is that really playing out versus the hype that surrounds the whole AI impact?
Yeah, I think our view is there are lots of practical applications of AI. So things like how do you iterate creative quicker? I think one thing that I think is really interesting for the industry as a whole is we can create all of these lovely audiences through Clubcard Insight, through data. I think the next step is being really clear how we can then message those audiences in different ways. And historically, that's been really difficult because the production costs are high, it takes time, et cetera, et cetera. Moving forward, that's clearly changing. and the role of AI in helping us connect data and insight and creative messaging and media deployment, I think is really exciting. Lots of work on targeting. So some of the audience generation that I just talked about is generated through AI moving forward. And we have a self-serve system called Sphere, which is where people can access insights and also deploy their media. That's increasingly going to be an AI-driven module moving forward. So people could input prompts and respond accordingly. Loads of practical applications of it, I'd say.
And you still think, Nick, that there's an opportunity for people to have a career, that they're not going to be sort of losing out as a consequence of AI?
I do, and I think the way I always think about it is, anything that frees up time for creative thinking, anything that frees up time for more of a consultative view, is a good thing. So if we can help AI generate some of those tasks that in the past have either required lots of operations or have taken up a lot of time, but that frees up time for people to think more creatively, then I think that can only be a good thing.
And if you think about a career in media right now, what skills do you think people really need to give them the best advantage?
One thing I'd say is that there are so many different routes in media. There always have been and there always will be, I think. So my personal view on this is that I think you can thrive in media, both if you're a specialist and also if you're a generalist, would be the first thing I would say. So let me give you some examples. So I think data literacy is really important. But if I take retail media, you don't have to be a data scientist to work in retail media. But you could be a data scientist and you could do it really well. I think commercial understanding is really important. So at the end of the day, advertising is there to help drive our clients' brand. And if you've got good commercial understanding, then that's one route. That's a really important capability. I think creative thinking really matters. I think if you look at the broader industry, we've all seen that stuff from the Ad Association, et cetera, about risks of advertising bombardment is, rather than bombard customers, how do we connect with them creatively in ways that they want brands to engage with them? I think that's really critical. And then probably the final thing I'd say in terms of skill set is being good at collaboration. Things are changing so fast. You need a group of people in order to collaborate around almost every issue, for every challenge. So you need to be a good collaborator and want to work across teams.
The pace of change is really affecting everything, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I think that's exciting too, isn't it? Because it gives us all sorts of possibilities that we might not have had in the past.
I think what's really interesting from what you've described as your own journey and the skill set that clearly is required today is thinking into the future. So I'm wondering, Nick, if we had you back on the podcast in 3 years' time, what do you think would need to have happened in retail media for Tesco, for the industry, and for talent, for you to continue to feel genuinely excited about where it's heading?
I think a couple of things. I think, let's start with Tesco first. I think for retail media to be the most helpful, relevant way in which brands can connect with our customers, and that it's seen as an integral part of the ecosystem, not a sort of separate bit of advertising business on the side, as a really integrated piece. Secondly, that we think, and this is retail media as a whole, that we think about it not in individual channels. So it's not about the web and app here, it's not about the store here, it's not about CRM here, it's about how they all connect together across the customer journey. I think that's really important. I think there are some challenges in retail media, some good challenges for us to face into. So things like measurement, there's lots of discussion about measurement at the moment. How are we genuinely proving incrementality? For example, how are we proving that retail media can drive brand measures as much as it can drive bottom of the funnel performance measures? So areas like that, I think I'd like to see more sort of focus on across the industry moving forward. And I think from a talent perspective, if I think of, in our particular experience, I think of the diversity of the talent that we now have in Tesco Media versus what we would have had. And Joe, thank you very much for lots of this. Versus a few years ago, so people who've been at dunnhumby for a long time, who are brilliant and add loads of value. But also, if you then mix that with some new thinking, with people from different experiences, I think is really good. So as I said before, I think there's room for lots and lots of different talents and skill sets and capabilities within the world of retail media. I think for us to continue to drive, to encourage that focus across data, creative, technology, media sales, strategy, etc., is really good. So the more we can do to build that diversity would be good.
I'm glad that you didn't say that you're expecting in 3 years' time the media will be finished. Yeah,
I definitely won't be thinking that.
Phew.
So Nick, just to wind up, because it's been really interesting chatting to you. But what has I want to ask you our signature question. What has really been your best yes yet?
This is really hard, actually, this question. I'm sure everyone tells you this when you have that podcast. I think my best yes yet, whilst working at Tesco Media, was some work we did with Heineken for their Birra Moretti brand, where they wanted to associate their beer with Italian food. And of course, most people will associate Italian food with wine. So there's a huge perception change that needs to be done there. And we built a year-long content partnership strategy with Heineken, where we were building content on Tesco. We were using influencers. We were then activating that in store. The reason I really like that is because not only did that particular partnership, I won't give the details, but not only did that particular partnership drive sales, it also had a huge, huge impact on helping change brand perceptions for Birra Moretti. And I think that's where retail media is going. So I think too often the focus is on short-term sales, which is really important. It's always going to be really good at that. But I think it can do so much more. And so that is probably my favorite yes, is when Heineken said, absolutely, let's do it. And the results were really strong.
There's always something. I always think it's really interesting that everybody has some unique deal or unique moment where it stands out in their mind and they just think, wow, that was just great. I think we're done, Nick. I think we're done. Thank you
fantastic.
so much.
Thanks. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, Nick.
Look forward to continuing to listen to the podcast.
Our Yes List recommendation for this episode comprises 2 books by Clive Humby, the legendary co-founder of dunnhumby and the godfather of modern customer data science. First up is Scoring Points. This is the absolute Bible on how dunnhumby conceived, pitched and launched the Tesco Club Card back in 1995. It's a fascinating inside look at how they decoded a mountain of raw supermarket transactions and used those insights to turn Tesco into the UK's undisputed retail king. The second book is Brand is Dead, Long Live the Customer. Written in the mid-2000s, it's brilliantly predicted the exact shift we're living through today, moving away from massive untargeted advertising and placing personalised first-party customer relationships at the absolute centre of retail. If you want to understand